What is going on? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk to you about SoFi. I want to go over some of the current data points, break it down on what really moved it today, and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up, and with that, let's get right to it. So SoFi did have another solid day, up 3.69%, 1966 the low, 2089 the high. So new 52-week high was hit for SoFi 3 consecutive days in a row. Aside from that, you did have a lot of good volume. So 111.17 million shares being traded, 70.8 is the average. So when it comes down to this spike up, a lot of that had to do with SoFi putting out news and then as well a new analyst rating. So when it comes down to the analyst rating, Barclays Terry, who has a 62% success rating, which is rather good for an analyst, did give a hold and $18 price target. Raised their price target. I believe previously it was 14 if I remember correctly, but nonetheless, this is always a good thing, kind of raising it above the average, which right now is 1545, and that does represent a negative 22.56% downside, and most likely probably I wouldn't anticipate this week, but maybe next week you'll be seeing a couple more ratings leading into SoFi's earnings. It doesn't logically make sense, but that's kind of what happens. So this was one bullish thing for SoFi. And then secondly, SoFi did put out news, 2 pieces of news. In fact, they are somewhat correlated, but one was this right here. So Cashmere partners with SoFi to expand access to venture capital. And then aside from that, though, you did also have this right here. So SoFi expands access to private markets with funds from Cashmere, Fundrise, Liberty, Street Advisors. So at the end of the day, this is very good in my opinion. And I think that in reality as well will really incentivize more member growth, primarily for SoFi Invest, because I think when it comes down to the member growth, people previously weren't getting over to SoFi because of SoFi Invest. It was because there are other products. But because of what SoFi has been really focusing on, and they've been doing a lot of good solid updates to SoFi Invest, that might be the focal point for younger generations to move over just for that. In my opinion, of course, I could be wrong, but in my opinion, I think this is good. Also, giving access to private markets is always a kind of something that a lot of institutions aren't really doing. So something to keep in mind. One thing I do want to bring up, though, is we did have one data point early this morning. I kind of mentioned that it might potentially impact SoFi, but that was the consumer credit change. Came in at 5.1 billion, forecast of 12.1. It is relatively old data. It is from May, so we don't necessarily have that from SoFi's Q2 earnings, but it is, from what I can see from analysts are still assuming solid double-digit growth. And so in reality, this data point did signal in May consumers weren't really out there obtaining new credit. So I feel like consumers are struggling a little bit, but if SoFi does continue their growth and nothing really changes on that front, then that does mean it is going to be the brick and mortar banks that are going to be ultimately struggling. So I think fintechs are actually making a big dent in the brick and mortar banks. So yeah, I think this is kind of inversely good for SoFi. Of course, assuming it is able to continue its growth and whatever else. And during their Q2 earnings, they don't have any major red flags. So yeah, I think this is kind of indirectly a good thing, but the market didn't seem to care about this all that much, in my opinion. The biggest thing was just tariffs. So people were really just not really knowing what's going on with tariffs. And I think that's been more of a common kind of scenario. It's just like, okay, deadlines are pushed back. You're getting this, you're getting this. It kind of feels like Oprah. It's just everyone just getting different rates. No real rhyme or reason to it. But yeah, let me know your general thoughts on that in the comments below. When it comes down to shorts, they did increase 19,000 shares, which is relatively on the kind of timid side. 13.72% of the free float is being shorted, works out to be 148.91 million shares overall are being shorted. So for those of you that do believe that their SoFi is a squeeze play, like its shorts still have not returned. And essentially, even popping over here, there is currently $2.86 billion worth of shorts in SoFi. So that's absolutely crazy. So just generally speaking, over the last 3 months, they have lost about, I'd say, $1.56 billion. So crazy stuff. Like, they've been getting their asses handed to them. And at the same time, that also does signal that they have also relatively deep pockets. So most likely it is probably the brick and mortar banks and maybe some other institutions that are shorting SoFi. But aside from all of that though, looking at the options, you had 104 million in calls, 40 million in puts. 45% of all the options being done were bullish in nature. And this is something that I've really signaled as a good thing to kind of take note of, right? Because essentially looking at options as more of a sentiment, it does give you an overview of kind of where people feel it might be going. So despite SoFi running up, popping over here for a second, so despite it running up 9.42% just in the last 5 days alone, 39.54% over the last 1 month, people are still remaining bullish and anticipating more upside. From the bulls, you do see a consensus for it to be roughly around that $21 to, I would say, $22 range for the end of this week. So still a lot more upside is anticipated. The bears are anticipating for it to be kind of between that $19.50 and that $20 range. So a little bit pullback minor on their front, but still a lot more upside is anticipated. These are all the transactions that did occur on the secondary market above $100,000. And this is one thing I actually like about SoFi's recent run, is it's not being influenced by algorithmic trading. It is truly institutions buying a stock. And this is something I kind of bring up in my pre-market videos on occasion, is that if a stock is getting pumped up and lower and whatever else because of algos, as soon as that entity turns off their algorithm, then the stock just tanks. And so it's kind of hollow. This right here is actual institutions like getting in and trading SoFi. So I would prefer this 10 out of 10 times, given any circumstance. And one thing was rather interesting. So once the market did open, you had this string of selling. I'm not really sure exactly why. Maybe this was attributed to shorts kind of returning or buying, or I'm not really sure exactly, but there was a string of selling right here that caused this minor pullback. Didn't really work out too well for them, because of course then you just had this massive amount of buys. So kicking it all off was that 5.87 million. So 57 seconds after the market did open, this is where all hell broke loose, and it just continued for pretty much the next 5 minutes or even further than that. So yeah, big things definitely coming for SoFi, still anticipated, with it closing at 19.95. It is currently trading between this R2 and this R1, so 18.97 will be a strong support. I don't see that being touched, at least for the foreseeable future. As I mentioned in my video yesterday, the only thing that can disrupt the FOMO in the market right now is Trump. If he kind of just starts causing some crap associated to tariffs or something along those lines, that's the only thing that could cause a certain level of uncertainty and a pullback in the market. If he kind of just stays quiet this whole week, you're going to see a continued push higher. So yeah, right now 20.34 and then 22.57 is going to be the next strong kind of points to get over, and most likely, given the circumstances, you will see it trading between this R3 and this R2 tomorrow. Aside from this new analyst rating, there wasn't really that much in articles or anything like that. On the actual chart, as I've brought up in the past, there's not really much negatives to kind of mention about SoFi, other than the fact that it is overbought, as I've kind of gave a little bit of a disclaimer, meaning first sign of weakness, or if Trump does kind of cause some crap, then you could see a little bit of a pullback. But nonetheless, very, very exciting stuff for SoFi. And this is why I think it was like a week ago, I mentioned that, hey, you know what, like if you are going to sell covered calls, you might want to hold off, because if you do believe a stock is going to go higher and you sell covered calls, you kind of get screwed. And for those of you that sell covered calls, this type of action right here is a killer, and one of the biggest kind of regrets. So I think at the end of the day, SoFi is just hell-bent on really moving higher. And I think in reality, with them offering crypto and a lot of their other updates, I think maybe the Wall Street is finally giving them a tech-ish type of multiple. So I think SoFi is going to be moving higher and potentially staying there. So it might be setting a new range, because of course, when I first started covering SoFi, it always traded between like $6 and $8. Sometimes it went higher, sometimes it went lower, but generally it liked to stay between that 6 to 8 range. During this kind of stage, it always traded between that 13 and 17 happy point. So maybe we're moving to the next leg up. Hopefully it'll trade between, let's say, that 21 and I don't know, 25 for the foreseeable future. But very exciting things are happening for SoFi. So let me know your thoughts on SoFi. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. I always greatly appreciate that. And actually, one thing I did want to kind of bring up, somewhat correlated with SoFi, but a lot of stocks, even on my watch list. So I cover Lucid. I have a dedicated Lucid channel. That one went up 9%. I cover SoundHound on this channel and it went up 11.69. SoFi did do fairly well, hitting another new 52-week high, closing 3.69%, far greater than the broader market. And all three of those stocks are very heavily shorted. So even though when it comes down to SoFi and shorts only increased like 19,000 shares, I feel like there was something to do with heavily shorted stocks behind the scenes. So yeah, I don't know, maybe there might be a broader market squeeze. And I feel like a lot of individuals are actually correlating what is happening now in the market, similar to what happened in 2021 when everything just went up like insane. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on SoFi. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. One final thing, pop over to my Patreon. I do give buy signals on stocks, options, crypto, many of which have been absolutely on point. Definitely worthwhile to pop over there and take a look. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.